So, does anyone care to touch on this further?
Back to the Greeks and Romans, but also through English thinking, especially through thinkers like John Locke. That thinking, that grounding, gave the American Revolution a deep and fundamental mooring. A mooring that, if is lost, turns to more revolutionary ideas, a rejection of truth, a growing sense of relativism.
My name is Jerry. I left MAGA, and I'm going to be continuing with this episode to discuss the training videos for Project 2025. You'll notice that this one was originally posted on ProPublica by ProPublica on August the 10th, 2014. What I want to point out is this name right here. In this video, Matthew Spalding, vice president at Hillsdale College, sets out on the landscape for the sets out the landscape. Let me make that bigger. Yes, there we go. Now we can all read it. In this video, Matthew Spalding, a vice president at Hillsdale College, sets out the landscape for the Presidential Administration Academy by talking about the common conservative principles. All right, well, let's reset that and let's go back to this video. If you don't know what Hillsdale College is, let me introduce you to it. The link will be in the description. They have a lot of different degree programs, and let's go ahead and make that also large enough for us to all see it. Oh, good grief. This is where I wanted to be. There we go. Developing minds, improving hearts. Hillsdale College is a small Christian classical liberal arts college in southern Michigan that operates independently of government funding. That means they're unaccredited and they don't take student loans. It's all privately funded, just like Liberty College. Monty Mader has talked about that. There's some of the other Bible-based colleges do the same thing. Anyway, our students come here from nearly all of the United States and a dozen foreign countries, drawn to the college or the challenge of a Hillsdale education. They grow in heart and mind by studying timeless truths in a supportive community dedicated to the highest things. And some of the stuff they have here, let me go ahead and restore that. We've got Logic and Rhetoric, The Story of America. Don't know that I'm going to look into that. Unashamed Academy. Now, this one, A History of Classical Music, Chopin through Gershwin. My girlfriend is a professional musician and very well versed in this stuff. This is her wheelhouse. So we're going to check it out. I'm going to sit down with her and we're going to work through it. But in the meantime, yeah, that's Hillsdale College. So with that in mind, let's go listen to this Matthew Spalding and see what he's got to say. This video is only 34 minutes long, so this should be a relatively short video. Thank you, ProPublica, for getting this done. Silly Heritage Foundation did not respond. They could have said their piece. They had the chance. This is what real journalism looks like.
Hello, I'm Matthew Spalding, Vice President of Hillsdale College.
Oh, hang on a second. Let me back that up a little bit. And let me boost that audio some. I probably need to take that to about an 8, I'm guessing. Yeah, this is how we do it on the fly. Hope that'll blow your eardrums out.
Hello, I'm Matthew Spalding, Vice President of Hillsdale College. I'm at our Washington, D.C. campus, where I'm also the Dean of the Stephen Amy Van Andel Graduate School of Government. I'd like to speak to you today about our common purpose, about America's common purpose. the things that are inherently American.
Oh, I hope we can hear him over this extremely uh, emotional music.
And that are at the heart of American conservatism.
In the eyes of many in the world, this every 4-year ceremony we accept as normal is nothing less than a miracle.
Today is the concrete expression of a stunning fact. These 200 years since our government began.
Only live
Only a
brace of high
greatly
it hasn't.
Whether we go diminished.
All right, let's do this thing. Presidential Transition Project. Conserving America. Smoke.
There are many things upon which we disagree concerning domestic policy, foreign policy, economic policy. Those disagreements are important, and it's important that we discuss and deliberate and resolve those disagreements. But those disagreements should not blind us to the things we hold in common, the more important and higher aspects of America's purpose, but also the things we wish to conserve. Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton famously disagreed on just about everything you can imagine, especially when it came to important national policies. But they agreed deeply on the most fundamental questions about the rights of man grounded in nature, about the essence of the rule of law and constitutional government. Those are the things that are important for us to understand, because those things, in addition to various policy matters we as conservatives hold to be true, but those things,
There's a lot of things that they hold to be true that are absolute fallacies.
the more fundamental things, are the essence, the foundation of conservatism. So I'm not going to talk about conservatism as much as that we wish to conserve. Those are the principles that are our inheritance. And those are the principles growing out of the Greeks and the Romans, informed by Athens and Jerusalem, going through British constitutionalism, that culminate in America. So as we deliberate and discuss the policy questions that we need to determine, it is important to keep in mind the larger objective, which is to recover, to restore, to conserve, and to save our country.
Okay, so I'm wondering if he's talking about taking voting rights away from women. I wonder if he's talking about um, fully embracing slavery again. I wonder what else he's talking about. Maybe he means that they shouldn't recognize Irish people as white anymore.
Every nation derives some meaning from underlying ideas, from its ethnic background, its character, common religion, a shared history. But this country is actually different. It was founded at a particular time, in a particular place, by a particular people.
Well, duh. You can say that about all nations or any club or group.
And it is that rich heritage of ideas, especially those stated in our core fundamental documents, that define us still as a nation and as a people.
You mean like where it says in the Declaration of Independence that all men are created equal? I mean, I understand in the social context what it meant, but society has progressed some since 1776. Thank goodness.
America was revolutionary, but not in the way we normally think of that word, especially if we have in mind the French Revolution or the communist revolutions in Russia or Cuba.
So people didn't die in the American Revolution.
It was revolutionary in the sense of ideas. It was in the minds and the hearts of the people, John Adams once wrote. That was a source.
So there was no driving people off their lands. There was no germ-laden blankets given to the First Nations people to kill them off because they didn't have an immune system to European diseases.
Course of the real American Revolution. It was about the ideas upon which a nation was to be established. Ideas that are applicable to all men in all times, as Abraham Lincoln once said. And they proclaimed that principle rather than will was to be the ultimate ground of government.
Really?
It was at a particular time in history that these universal ideas became the foundation of a particular system of government and a particular political culture. And that revolution culminated not in the guillotine, but in constitutional government.
Through a war that killed a whole lot of people and involved several countries. I mean, had it not been for the French, we would have had our tails handed to us, we the colonialists. Um, my Mima was a member of the Daughters of the Pilgrims, uh, as well as Daughters of the American Revolution.
A government that is long endured. Those ideas, which we want to discuss briefly, are found in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. Those ideas still define us as much as they
Do they?
are debated in many parts of our media and culture. And they define us because our system points backward, not merely historically backward, but as a practical matter. Our first law is our highest law, the Constitution. And our system
Somebody needs to remind Donnie of that.
in principle, is built upon the foundations of the Declaration of Independence. Those ideas, that Constitution, still are beacons for everyone in the world. They're still warnings for despots around the world. And they are still the brightest lights and the greatest inspiration for freedom and liberty in the world, but especially here at home.
It's going to take forever to get through this. All right, let's keep trying.
Although much of our history begins earlier, we can define the American founding period as encompassing two pivotal moments. One is between 1775, the opening, the Battle of Lexington, and the Treaty of Paris in 1783, the American Revolution. And the other is after the Revolution, in 1785, when it starts earnestly getting a movement towards the Constitution. And then perhaps 1797, the constitutional period at the end of Washington's first administration. And those two periods are dominated by two monumental documents.
The Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution. I wonder if he's including the Bill of Rights in with the Constitution, because me, myself, I have a pocket Constitution that includes the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the full Bill of Rights as a single document.
Declaration of Independence and the United States Constitution. The movement towards the Declaration of Independence begins in 1763. America, we can say, begins as a tax revolt. The British, after the French.
Okay, he's right about the tax revolt thing, but with him completely discounting the Bill of Rights, he's not recognizing that the Constitution as written is a flawed document. That's why we have amendments.
In war needed revenue, and they sought that revenue by tax bills, taxing the American colonists. The American colonists objected from the very beginning on the grounds that historically, all the way back to Magna Carta, they had a right against taxation without representation. The British passed tax bills and then revoked those bills, but always maintained they had the right to pass whatever legislation they wanted in all circumstances whatsoever. After one of those acts, the American colonists got together for the first time in what is called the Stamp Act Congress. That legislation was also withdrawn, but the British continued to pass various measures, including measures to tax various goods, including tea, which, after all else had been withdrawn except for that tax, the Americans dumped into Boston Harbor. That, of course, led to the First Continental Congress. But something very important happened at the First Continental Congress.
Is loosely accurate for the most part here, but he's weaving this timeline incredibly loosely so that he can put his own narrative in here. All right, so let's see what he has to say about the First Continental Congress.
They started to debate and discuss the grounds upon which they might need to establish their independence. Up to that time, they had largely acted to defend and appeal to their rights as Englishmen, rights going back to Magna Carta itself and coming down through British constitutionalism. But they realized that that ground would not be sufficient to fight a war against the British king. And so they considered other options in a debate at the First Continental Congress. Our charters, our rights before Parliament. Ultimately, they chose to ground their claims upon nature, a more philosophically and more fundamental ground that was a defense of rights behind Magna Carta, behind and beyond the rights of Englishmen to their rights as humans.
I was getting ready to point out that I'm wondering if he's catching the humanist link in this new thought process that the founding fathers were a part of. This whole deep thinkers thing that was going on back then, questioning religion.
And so they turned to nature as the ground for the claim of rights, the ground upon which they would make their claims of independence, the grounds upon which they would assert their rights as an independent nation.
Okay, natural law. I think that's what he's referring to, is what's recognized as natural law.
And it was this turn to nature that is classically represented in the Declaration of Independence, but seen throughout many of the documents developing from the 1760s to 1776. It's classically stated within the Declaration of Independence by reference to the laws of nature and nature's God, which is itself an incorporation of aspects of a much deeper and longer natural law tradition, going back.
Right, right. But it also, in the Declaration of Independence, mentions that not only are we all created equally, but created equally in the eyes of our Creator, allowing each individual the freedom of choice and whether or not they even want to believe in a Creator, and if so, who they want their Creator to be. Which is why I think the flying spaghetti monster is an epic meme. Oops. Hang on.
Back to the Greeks and Romans, but also through English thinking, especially through thinkers like John Locke. That thinking, that grounding, gave the American Revolution a deep and fundamental mooring. A mooring that, if is lost, turns to more revolutionary ideas, a rejection of truth, a growing sense of relativism, and ultimately a nihilism, that there are no truths worth conserving or living for. The Declaration of Independence, which
I'm seeing this is how they're able to discount a concept like science. In fact, that up just a little bit. That's how they're able to disconnect from concepts like science, because as we understand more through investigating them, utilizing scientific methods, we are allowed to change our minds on things like, oh, I don't know, the psychology of transgenderism, or a better understanding of the various types of autism, which is not caused by vaccines or Tylenol or acetaminophen, that word that Trump couldn't pronounce. Anyway, oh my goodness. They just, all these thought stopping processes are just like scattered through everything, everything that is taught through this movement.
Conserving or living for. The Declaration of Independence, which is, say, the philosophical grounding of the American Revolution, takes an opposite course. It grounds its sense of politics in the laws of nature and nature's God. There are truths that are knowable that can be the guide and the ground for politics. These are self-evident truths.
Self-evident truths like making sure that people in your country don't starve, that they've got housing and health care and mental health care and safety and security and freedom from it's just, oh good grief, manipulation by the media, being lied to by the government. You would think that these would be protections that a benevolent government would install.
And the first one is that all men are created equal. We're not equal in many aspects, size and shape. We're equal in the fundamentals, in our humanity, which means that none of us have more rights than another. None has a right to rule, and none is condemned to be ruled. This sense of equality at the center of the Declaration of Independence, grounded in nature, not merely the whims of rulers or the whims of Congress or the Supreme Court, is what gives meaning to this nation.
Okay, so I don't know if you picked up on it, but he used the word equality in there when the word he should have used was equity. Let's go back and
This sense of equality at the center of the Declaration of Independence ruled.
all right, so yeah, let's back that up another 5 seconds. Let's get that in context again.
Right to rule, and none is condemned to be ruled. This sense of equality at the center of the Declaration of Independence.
This sense of equity. It should be equity. If there was equity in society, then everybody has the same starting point.
Grounded in nature, not merely the whims of rulers or the whims of Congress or the Supreme Court, is what gives meaning to this nation. Out of that grows our equal fundamental rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Ding, 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 ding. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. Exactly. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for everyone. Transgenders, Latinos, uh, just the whole spectrum, guys, girls, everybody, everybody. It's a fundamental right. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Not getting picked up by ICE because you've got a different skin color or a weird accent like Melania does.
Our own lives, we fundamentally have a right to. Our liberty as human beings. The founders preferred the word liberty, which is an old Latin word, as opposed to freedom, a more Germanic word, precisely because it implied that liberty which is inherent to human beings. And we have a right to the pursuit of happiness. They didn't use Locke's formulation of life, liberty, and property, but the broader notion of the pursuit of happiness. It includes property. Property is the flooring, if you will. We have a right to our property. We have a right to acquire property, to buy and sell property. We have a right to add to property through the fruits of our labor. But beyond that, we have a higher and more important right, which is the culmination of our happiness, which is a right to come to know the truth about the most important things, and especially.
Man, this dude is frustrating me all to Dickens. Anyway,
Which is a right to come to know the truth about the most important things, and especially religious truth. hence the grounding of the right to religious liberty, which we will see.
The First Amendment provides protections from a government established religion. For example, the Church of England.
Expressed most famously later in the Constitution itself, in the First Amendment. I might note here the great contradiction of slavery. It existed at the time of the founding. Indeed, the draft of the Declaration condemned the slave trade, but great compromises were made with slavery. But most importantly, the seed of its condemnation, the beginnings of the abolitionist movement, actually grow out of the Declaration of Independence and its proclamation that all men are created equal.
So I wonder if he's aware of how many of his listeners are running around flying Confederate flags and saying, "Damn Skippy, the Bible backs slavery." I wonder.
In addition to the idea of equality and rights, the other great truth that is self-evident according to the Declaration is the question of consent. Legitimate governments must grow out of the consent of the governed. Indeed, if we are equal in fundamentals, we're equally human, we have equal rights, the only way to proceed is through some sense of consent.
Then why do so many people on your side dehumanize their fellow humans by calling Democrats demon rats, and having such a broad variety of slurs for every other demographic in the country?
Which in our country is representative forms of government. Lastly, I note that we have a collective right to alter or abolish our government when it does not do its fundamental purpose, which is to secure these rights. And in those cases, we can do something about it if it becomes destructive of those ends. This is oftentimes referred to the right of revolution, but I note that it's immediately moderated and qualified. There has to be a long trail of abuses, and it's not to be done for light and transient reasons. We don't.
Would a year be considered a long train of abuses and usurpations? Would a year be long enough, or does it have to go longer than that? Or can we go ahead and count the first 4 years from the first administration and just tag this on as continuation because it's gotten accelerated? I'm just wondering.
Don't have a right to take the law into our own hands. And if we have a right to abolish government, we also have a duty, an obligation to institute new government.
This is true. But what they are wanting to do is abolish the old governments. That's why there's so many of them that want to rewrite the Constitution. That's why there's been so many constitutional violations by the Trump administration, because they want to instill their own governmental system.
In short, these ideas, I would argue, that there are truths to be understood in light of the laws of nature and nature's God, and that evident among those truths are that all men are created equal.
Wait, nature has a God? Nature has a God. That's what he just said. And nature's God.
That there are truths to be understood in light of the laws of nature and nature's God, and that evident among those truths are that all men are created equal. They equally possess fundamental certain rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The job of government is to secure those rights according to the consent of the governed. Those ideas are the very essence of American conservatism.
And that's why they are refusing to pay attention to the anti-ICE protests and the No Kings protests. By the way, today is March 26th, 2026. No Kings 3 is on Saturday, the 28th. I am going to be out there. I'm going to be out there. Yeah, more information on that later. I've I've got an appointment with my buddy Justin Saturday evening to do a live stream together. And we're going to compare notes between what he sees in Columbia, Missouri, and what I get to see here in St. Louis, Missouri. I'm hoping that I get to interact with some folks here.
And what we wish to conserve. They aren't the gifts of government. They aren't to be determined by mere majorities. They aren't based on laws. They are grounded in the very nature and essence of things, which gives conservatism a permanent grounding and a fundamental ground for it to proceed. In addition to those more fundamental principles, we would also add a bedrock concept, which is unstated in many ways, but seen throughout everything growing out of the American Revolution and in our Constitution, which is the rule of law. Indeed, the development of the rule of law through history, through British constitutionalism into the American founding, is one of the greatest accomplishments of Western civilization. One need only read history or perhaps read Shakespeare to see that throughout much of that history, there wasn't the rule of law. Indeed, the person who had the most power was the one who determined what the law was.
Maybe they just need to read anything, read anything other than the Constitution and the Bible. Read anything else, add something else to your repertoire. Um, might I suggest The Gospel of J. Edgar Hoover by Lerone A. Martin? Or maybe One Nation Under Blackmail, Volumes 1 and 2 by Whitney Webb? Or Star Spangled Jesus by April LaJoy? There's a lot of others out there. Oh, Separation of Church and Hate by John Fugelsang. Read a book, please. Read a book.
Americans, through their colonial experience, had learned to rule themselves under British constitutionalism. And through that experience of taxation and increasing despotism, had the experience to continue to rule themselves and took that as a fundamental element of what their founding was meant to accomplish. They had many experiments to do so. In states, there were numerous failures and great successes. Many states were riven by questions of faction and disagreement. They weren't protecting rights. The Articles of Confederation, passed during the American Revolution, were in many ways a great accomplishment, but also a great failure in what they were unable to do in terms of creating a nation. And all this
Hmm.
led to a great constitutional convention in the spring and summer and fall of 1787 that created the American Constitution. That Constitution is a great example, perhaps the greatest example of constitutionalism in Western civilization. And they created what is today the longest national constitution still in use. It's laid
I'll beg to differ. Um, hmm, I'll bring the sources on that another time.
out in core parts and articles, creating three branches of government.
Actually, I can pull that information up and throw it on the end of this video and post.
The legislature, the executive, and the judiciary, starting with the most democratic to the least, beginning with the lawmaking branch. And each three of those branches begins with a vesting clause, which is to say the Constitution is one of delegated powers. They're delegated precisely because the Declaration has first established the sovereignty of the people.
No, 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 no. The Constitution is not delegated authorities. The Constitution has established boundaries for the power of the government.
People possess rights, not the government. Indeed, according to the American understanding of politics, no government, the federal government, the state governments, the dog catcher, possess rights at all. They only have certain powers. And those are laid out very carefully in our American Constitution.
I think it's rather interesting that he throws a dog catcher in there. Hmm, how is a dog catcher a governing body? I mean, is this how we wound up with Chrissy Nome as Secretary of DHS for a while?
Constitutional system, enumerated, especially in the first article concerning the legislature, and then less so, but significantly, concerning the executive and judiciary. The Constitution also includes a Bill of Rights, which importantly, especially in the First and Second Amendments, protect our most fundamental freedoms: our religious liberty, the right to speech, and free press, rights to assembly and petition in the first, and the second, the right to bear arms. Those were understood to be fundamental rights necessary to protect in Republican government.
And that is how it came to be that a former MAGA associate who found out I was working at that time with a legislative action team requested that I try to get something started to get public dueling made legal again. Ah, you don't like my words? Let's go to a duel. Didn't Mark Wayne Mullen during his confirmation hearing challenge somebody to a fist fight? Was that Mark Wayne that did that?
Right.
What kind of name is that?
It's necessary to protect in Republican government. Today, we often see the Bill of Rights as the Constitution. That's especially how the Supreme Court often looks at it. But it's important to understand that they were amendments, additions to the body of the Constitution itself. The result of all this is a decentralized structure of a strong and energetic but limited federal government, a government that allows for a decentralization of power into the states and to local government, and because of local government, self-government.
So that's why Trump sent ICE agents into big cities and stirred up trouble.
This system of governing, of limited powers at the top, of more powers at the state level, and as many powers as possible actually not controlled by politics, but allowed to be governed by self-governing individuals, is what creates the essence of American democracy.
So Trump, remember, he said on a number of occasions, let the states decide. But then whenever they don't agree, when the states don't agree with the federal government, Trump wants to send in federal troops. He wants to break things and cry about it.
The institutions of civil society, churches, schoolrooms, families, those are the most important political institutions in our system. Those are the ones that play the most important role in shaping our characters and shaping ourselves to be good, self-governing citizens. The Constitution, the federal Constitution and the state constitutions, create a framework by which we can govern ourselves. They are meant to secure the rights of the Declaration of Independence. They are meant to uphold the powers defined in their documents, especially those that are delegated to the federal Constitution and limited at the federal level. And they are meant to provide liberty for ourselves and our posterity.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for everybody, for all persons.
This conception of government, these principles, was the American consensus, despite a history of great disagreements. And indeed, the one exception proves the rule. And that was when we had a fundamental disagreement over a fundamental question: slavery and the Civil War. John C. Calhoun famously said that slavery was a positive good. Chief Justice Taney said that slaves were property and that they had no rights that we were bound to respect. And even Stephen Douglas, the senator from Illinois, said that this should be solved through the questions of popular sovereignty. Anything, as long as the majority consented. It was
Majority consenting, 51%.
Abraham Lincoln who objected to all of these arguments and instead recalled the nation to its founding principles, recalled it to its Constitution, but a Constitution which was understood in light of the principles of the Declaration. These ideas came to be challenged, and our system changed in many fundamental ways after the Civil War, especially.
Yeah, they were challenged by the Civil War. Essentially, the part of America that broke away and didn't want to be part of America anymore. Um, and there's this whole demographic in the modern era that are perfectly down with pulling that stunt again, and they call themselves constitutional Americans. The irony, the hypocrisy. Uh,
The beginnings of the 20th century, when a movement, a growing movement of ideas, especially coming from Germany and France and educational systems in Europe, led to what is called progressivism. The progressives had certain anti-foundational principles at heart. They did not believe there were any truths or first principles. And
wait. He's declaring no, that he said no truths or first principles. He's declaring on the graphic here no absolute truth or first principles. When you start accepting absolute truths, you start setting yourself up for a problem.
grounded their system on a sense of relativism. They also believed that there were no principles that withstood the test of time.
Yeah, like plural marriage, having multiple wives, or what polygyny, what some refer to as one-way monogamy. Um, that's the principle of slavery did not stand the test of time. The principle of being able to legally beat your wife did not stand the test of time. Um, anyway,
They were merely ideas that were historically bound and grounded. They believed that all things would progress and evolve. That led them to a new theory of unlimited government. Indeed, they wanted to change the limited constitutional system that defined our republic to one of a growing, evolving, and living constitution.
the Constitution is a living document, and this guy is supposedly advocating for smaller government. But if that's the case, why is it now that out of this program, uh, we in America are facing ICE, who has a budget larger than the United States Marine Corps? Oh, and by the way, what does Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Border Patrol, need with missiles? Asking for a friend.
The key operational part that they designed was what they called administration, what we today refer to as administrative government.
Progressives did not invent this. Administration is nothing new. The ancient Egyptians were excellent with administration. We still have papyri available that were written by quarry gang leaders and pyramid building gang leaders that document the names of workers and the distribution of food for the workers. Administration is not new.
Government would be mostly conducted by experts and bureaucrats who were not within the Congress or the executive, at least in terms of being subject to the consent of the governed.
I wonder if he would be willing to go get his appendix taken out by a barber.
They were independent of politics, separated, such that they would conduct government outside of consent. That was also based on a new theory of rights. The job of government was still to secure those rights, but those rights were no longer those consistent with and defined by our nature as much as created. by government, especially by courts, based on the demand.
How many domestic violence cases are managed in court? And not enough of them are handled properly, but any human rights violations are handled well. Not all of them, but not enough of them. There's not enough accountability in the system. This is why we need the courts. If we had a court system that worked, a 34-time felon would not be walking around on the streets.
Demands of groups, claims. What the progressives wanted was to establish a freedom from nature, a liberation from human nature, such that it becomes the autonomous pursuit of self-realization.
Holy Nikes! So he's bringing in a eugenics concept here, and it also seems like he's adding in this whole bad blood thing. And mm, good grief!
And so the job of government is to secure that liberation of what the human wills. An objection to the
It's up to the government to free the person. It's not, dude, dude. It's up to the individual to free themselves. There was an old song. I don't remember who it was by. Free your mind and the rest will follow. It's actually a really good philosophical concept. Maybe you should sit down and look in the mirror and talk to yourself for a while and give yourself an interview. Um, maybe have the therapist sit there and monitor you while you do it.
progressive movement, actually, is the origins of what we today call conservatism. But here I would actually associate the actual beginnings of conservatism with a rejection of progressivism. And I do so
In other words, protect the status quo at all costs.
to remind us of the debate here in the American context of these two great alternatives. In particular, in the election of 1912, both Woodrow Wilson and Theodore Roosevelt were pursuing and arguing for progressive ideas. And then later, we associate this argument with Calvin Coolidge, for instance, began to see that this was a threat to our Constitution and behind the Constitution to the groundings, the philosophical groundings in the Declaration of Independence.
So changing and improving is a bad thing, is what he's saying.
That pushback, that beginning of conservatism, we see then argued in, especially in the judicial context, where it first became evident. We see it in the pushback against the New Deal that ultimately culminated in Barry Goldwater's campaign, or in the arguments against the Great Society, which led to the great efforts of Ronald Reagan in the 1980s. So how then do we proceed? How do we learn from the principles of the American founding going forward in a world of disagreement, in a world of particular circumstances informed by those ideas? And here I actually want to reintroduce an idea that itself is built upon an older and more classical understanding of politics.
Like the Roman Senate, they couldn't get anything done.
A world of politics, what I would suggest the founders had at least one foot in. That is to introduce the cardinal virtue of prudence. It's in the Declaration of Independence.
Well, that just wouldn't be prudent, would it?
If you look at that famous second paragraph, the first part of the paragraph introduces all those abstract ideas. All men are created equal. These are self-evident truths. Governments secure those rights based on consent. But that's one sentence. And the very next sentence begins, prudence will dictate. That is to say, prudence is this operational virtue, this moral virtue, this central virtue of the statesman, which translates abstract truths, fundamentals, and how do we apply them in particular circumstances. And that is also an essential quality of conservatism.
So he's programming bots. That's exactly what he's doing. He's programming bots.
Taking a principle, a thing that does not change, that's abstract, that's true, that's a universal, and applying it in particular circumstances, such that it has an actual reality, also a truth, in that time. Conservatism should not be approached as itself a set of doctrinal ideas that never change. Our policy disagreements are just that, things that change depending on the circumstances.
Or things that change depending on who's in power.
We must be consistent and strong and clear on the principles of the matter, but we must be adaptive and innovative and flexible in practice. And that is itself an essence, an essential quality of conservatism. That allows us to have great agreement in principle and to allow that agreement in principle to then give us the ability to deliberate and build consensus on the particulars. So, what we need in the end is a rediscovery of conservatism, a reborn conservatism, a conservatism that is grounded in the principles of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States.
Well, they're definitely not sticking to that plan, are they?
Those truths, those self-evident truths according to the laws of nature and nature's God, of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, of legitimacy of government coming from the consent of the governed. A
If the governed were consenting to all the nonsense going on, we wouldn't have had 40,000, or was it 4,000? 40,000, I think is the number I heard, protests in 2025. We wouldn't have No Kings 3 coming up. No Kings 2 is bigger than No Kings 1. Those were two of the biggest protests that have ever happened in the United States. We're setting records because we don't like things. We're doing it peacefully.
a conservatism that understands man's self-interest but also sees his capacity for virtue. A conservatism of the Constitution limits government, but it sees that government performs its job effectively and energetically.
Is that why ICE got so much money?
It refines popular opinion through representation, and it uses the structures of government, the separation of powers, the checks and balances, to keep government limited and secure rights, all through an extended nation of states and a decentralization of power to magnify and strengthen self-government. That understanding of the grounding of conservatism creates a natural fusion. It reminds economic conservatives of a fuller understanding of the human person and prevents the development of that sense of autonomous individualism that we associate so much with modern liberalism. It reminds traditional conservatives of the rational ground, the moral principles of their ideas.
The moral principles of their ideas by chanting for mass deportations?
That are needed to distinguish between good traditions and bad traditions.
Like, is he considering good traditions dragging the bodies of Democrats through the streets? Is that a good tradition? I remember that actually being a tradition. Thank goodness.
Without which tradition merely wanders and follows history and its trends. And it gives national security conservatives or national interest conservatives or national conservatives, it gives them the substance they lack by tying nationalism to a particular nation.
Well, I'm glad he threw that little definition in there. Of course, nationalism is tied to a particular nation.
To our nation, to this nation, so conceived and so dedicated. America's principles were the key to Frank Meyer's original fusionism in the 1960s, which tied together traditionalists and libertarians. Those principles were also the key to Ronald Reagan's conservatism in the 1980s. Those times have passed, but the principles have not. The truths of our founding are today increasingly under attack. They have been for some time in our universities, but are increasingly also under attack in our K through 12 educational system, especially bad history ideas being introduced into those schools.
He's trying to reference CRT there without saying CRT. And CRT actually teaches legitimate history of America, like the Japanese and German internment camps during World War II, or the Trail of Tears, and how Native American reservations are essentially cattle ranches.
To see our country as systemically racist. It has its flaws, for sure, but it completely misses how its beginnings and aspirations corrected those flaws and led to our great government and great country today. Those ideas are also under attack in our politics itself, especially because of the vast expansion of the modern state, of administrative bureaucracy, which is becoming increasingly ideological in its regulatory actions. And we see this attack throughout our culture and society in various ways all around us. But I just want to remind us that our objective here, our common objective, is to save our country, its underlying principles and way of life. The idea of equal rights for all, special privileges for none, under the laws of nature and nature's God, the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, of a recognition of our rights to property and to the fruits of our labor, but also to our more fundamental right of religious liberty. That government, legitimate government, must be based on the consent of the governed. That all government stems from the rule of law, and that our government is one of delegated powers of limited constitutional government. All of which is designed to preserve and protect not only the rights which with we are endowed, but our ability to be self-governing and to rule ourselves. These principles, these ideas are actually the source of our recovery of conservatism, as well as the recovery of our country itself. It's a true understanding of the nature of man, the nature of politics, and a true understanding of justice. And that makes our country worth saving, worth recovering, worth conserving. Thank you.
Man, that last few minutes was really hard to get through. So yeah, that was Mr. Matthew Spalding, one of the vice presidents at Heritage Foundation. Now, I'd meant to point this out in the first training video. Link for this is in the description. Overall progress, 52% of Project 2025 has been implemented. Total objectives, 320. Agencies involved, 32. Now, you'll notice there's a little bit peeking out over here, so I want to show you what's hiding over there. Time until end of term, 1,030 days, 20 hours, 39 minutes, and counting. All right, so there we go, folks. You made it to the end. I am impressed because this was challenging for me to get through. I tell you what, I appreciate you making it to the end. Any comments, thoughts, questions, please drop them in the comments section. Links to everything will be in the description. Until the next video, take care of yourself so you can take care of each other. Get the rest you need and track those fluids.